Hello, everyone, and welcome to McGill Cares webcast series supporting family and informal caregivers. I'm Claire Webster, a former caregiver, certified dementia care consultant, and founder of McGill University's Dementia Education Program. I work with a dynamic team of leading healthcare professionals to oversee the program, who include Dr. José Moret from the Division of Geriatric Medicine and Dr. Serge Gauthier, Professor Emeritus, formerly of the McGill University Research Center for Studies in Aging. McGill Cares is supported by the Amelia Saputo Community Outreach for Dementia Care. Today's topic is a special one. It is about life, love, strength, a doctor's journey of caring for his wife. I've previously had caregivers on McGill Cares, but they have all been women. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing from a male perspective today. My guest is Dr. Robert Francis. Dr. Francis graduated from the McGill Faculty of Medicine in 1968. He is founder and former chairman emeritus of Medcan Health Management, Inc., and most recently, the founder and CEO of ReGen Scientific, Inc., both of which are medical services clinics focused on preventive medicine. While caring for his wife, Sharon, who passed away from Alzheimer's disease in 2019, he searched relentlessly around the world for a cure. He has since set up the Sharon Francis Institute for Regenerative Medicine in her memory. Dr. Francis will talk about his experience caring for his wife and how her life with Alzheimer's disease drives his mission to find a cure and improve the lives of those now living with the disease. Welcome to McGill Cares, Dr. Francis.
Thank you very much. I enjoy being here.
So how about we begin by telling us about, your life with Sharon. How did you meet? Sharon was a nurse. I mean, give us a little bit of, set the background for us.
Well, first of all, I grew up in Stellarton, Nova Scotia, which was a small coal mining town. And ultimately, I went to St. Francis Xavier to go into science, and then pre-med, and then medicine. And I was a little bit accelerated by my age and background. So I was in my last year at St. FX at the age of 18 and already accepted into McGill when I turned 19. But as a restless young man, I was always looking for the girl of my life. Couldn't find her. And so one night I'm at a dance hall where I shouldn't have been, probably in the middle of a week. And there was not many people there. It was next to St. Francis Xavier. And I'm walking out, and there were 3 young girls coming in. And the last one in the lineup, I looked at her, and I said to myself, I know her. I'd never met her, but I knew her. Mm. And so I, of course, turned around, went back in. She felt the same as she told me later, and she hit on me. Eventually, I sorted her out, and she was a young nurse finishing her training at St. FX. And her aspiration was to go on to do psychiatric nursing in Boston. And of course, I said, well, it's great. I'm going to McGill. And, so over the summer, I graduated. I was getting ready to go, and she got a job up to Celtic Lodge in the middle of Cape Breton. She was from Cape Breton. And I'd go up on wing weekend, and we're dating, but you're 18, 19 years old, and each partner is going in a different direction. But I was very fond of her, obviously. And I go in one afternoon up to the Celtic. I was with the military in the summer. Used to be called UNTD, on the other end of Nova Scotia. But anyway, I made the journey in a $100 car. And I come in, and she says, something strange happened. I said, well, I was in the sick bay for the hotel, and a woman came in to see her and came back a half hour later and said, I would like to offer you a job. And Sharon at the time said, I wasn't looking for a job. I was, going ahead with my profession. No, she said, you might be very interested in this job. I would like to hire you as the nurse in residence at the Royal Victoria College for Women in McGill.
Oh my goodness!
Now,
what a coincidence.
Well, the chance of that happening would be like 1 in a million. And not only that, they have, I believe they still have a nice college for women on Sherbrooke Street. And they had always kept two nurses with both apartments. Would have her own little apartment and be able to eat in the cafeteria. And I already was lined up to go to a frat. And I said, I think you should take the job. So fast forward, needless to say, I would go down and study when in her flat, but then I would walk back up Mountain Street to fraternity. And because I was related to the military previously, I decided I would re-enter the military to pay my way through medical school. And I said to her at the end, well, during my second year, I said, why don't we just get married? And we did.
Oh my goodness.
So we got married at the end of August the 13th, 1966. Mm-hmm. And I graduated from medicine in 1968. Now, when she left, obviously she had to leave her job at the college, but she got a job at the Royal Vic, and she became an assistant head nurse, even though she had not gone through the McGill program. Mm-hmm. She was very fundamental, strong, determined, beautiful, but kind, but tough for me. Because if I didn't study, she would say, you got to study. Okay.
And how many children did you end up having together?
We ended up having 2 children. So I interned at St. Michael's, and then I had to go back to the military. So I went back to Cornwallis, and my oldest son was born in 1970. Mm-hmm. And then by that time, after I did 3 years, I came back to Toronto and did internal medicine at Toronto General. And my daughter was born in 1975. So my son has 3 sons, and my daughter has 2 older daughters and a young boy who's about 8 or 9 now. And she lives in the States. So there you are.
So let's fast forward now to when did you first start noticing the early signs and symptoms of the illness with Sharon? Like, how old was she, and like, how did it begin?
It was in around, first of all, it's important to understand, when I was building the business, there were 3 parts to the business, and she became incorporated into all of that. The first part was the issue of, when I opened my practice in 1978 as an internal medicine specialist, I always had an interest in cardiac testing because it was new, believe it or not. And so I had the first treadmill in Canada, which would have the electrodes as opposed to the suction cups. And that was the start of the beginning of a journey. And so by 1980, I had a holding company called TranMed, and I started a business company called Can Health. And what it would do would be have contracts with like Texaco and the refineries, Inco. And I put my wife in charge of the nursing stations across the country. She loved it. And she also, by that time, we had moved into 150 York. So she was also the senior nurse watching over everything. And the long of it is, the Canada Health Act changed in 1985, and it took away the ability for doctors to bill direct and the patient gets a reimbursement. So I sold Can Health in 1985. And I said to Sharon, because she was working with me, what do you want to call the new company? She said, well, for God's sakes, take the med off your FranMed holding company and take the can off Can Health. We're going to call it Medcan. 1986. And throughout the remaining of the years from 86 really to 2005, she traveled with me. She was my partner. She ran the nursing teams. The best one I ever saw her do was, we used to look after Canada Post, and the managers, she was running the nursing stations. And one time the managers said, we need a tougher nurse, Sharon. She was the only one in the room, the 12 managers. She said, I got the perfect nurse for you. What is it? I'm going to get you a pit bull lipstick. So that was the kind of lady she was. And we moved many times as she built a business. Didn't bother her because she'd always adopted it as her new residence. And before I knew it, she was redecorating it. That's the kind of person I was married to. Now, over time, she also had loved her fashion, and she could go to Yorkdale Shopping Center from Toronto blindfolded. And one day she got lost in 2005. And she didn't get really lost. She just, for a moment, forgot how to get there. It's very subtle. And by that time, I had a relationship with John Hopkins and in the States. I said, let's go down and have you, just cognitively assessed and have a brain imaging or whatever.
But just from that one incident, you thought just from that one incident, it made you concerned, or had there been other
my
little
mother
symptoms?
died with Alzheimer's, so I was aware that the brain will get early stages. You may forget simple little things, or like how to get from A to B. But she's a nurse, and so we went down, and their diagnosis was minimal cognitive. Of course, I came home and she was reading the books in their library, and I said, Sharon, let's not get fussed about what may be. Let's deal with today's issues. And she continued to travel with me and whatever. But by 2006, 2007, I would tell her, I got a car for you, but you can't drive it until you know how to back it in and all these other things. But the disease started to become more predominant, but only in the sense of her sense of anxiety and awareness, which a lot of people will understand when you're married to a partner for a long time. The symptoms are very subtle. Mm-hmm. And we often disregard as a partner the fear and frightening that's going on with the spouse or loved one.
Did your children notice things that you perhaps didn't? Because I hear that a lot from.
Yeah, but my sister, my daughter,
okay,
because she was close to her, and it was her that noticed that Mom seems to be forgetting little things. By that time, my daughter was pregnant, and she eventually had a young granddaughter. And my wife, of course, her name was Elle, so she would want to be able to go down to the stage and push around and one thing and another. But the symptoms became somewhat more apparent. But my wife and I never talked about it, in the sense that I never tried to make her feel that she wasn't a person. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a critical thing. Most of us think, well, they don't know who they are, too bad, I'm okay. It's not life. So a long story, around 2006, 2007, I started to look at where the research was around the world. And I came across a Dr. Wischik, who had been at Cambridge University as a young man, and he was partnered up with a doctor who had got the Nobel Prize for protein analysis. And the journey that Wischik was put on by this other doctor was what kind of protein is in the brain of the people that died with what Dr. Alzheimer saw in 1905. It's a spindle. The reason I know this because I sought him out, because by the time I sought him out, he had already made a discovery that the spindle was made up of tau, not amyloid, which is important because all big pharma has been looking at amyloid.
Can I just ask you, at this point, when you were seeking this out, how many years into the illness was Sharon?
I would say she was 3 years.
And were you hoping that you would be able to find a cure,
yes.
Reverse this?
Yes. And so I actually sought him out. By that time, he had created a company called Taurex, and he was raising money to do a big study, because what happened in his laboratory, not only did he determine it was tau, but one day he was staining it with methylene blue, which is really methylene chloride, and he found that the tau aggregate would evaporate. So his brain went into overdrive, and he decided and experimented with a drug called methylene chloride. And I read, was looking to raise capital to actually do a major worldwide study. So I called him up. I thought he was in Cambridge, but actually he had been moved to Aberdeen, Scotland, because Aberdeen bought the university rights, I guess, to the study. And I said, I'd like to come over and talk to you about investment. But on the back of my mind, I took her with me. So I left. She was well enough to stay at a hotel. I go down and meet Dr. Wischik, and he says, so why are you really here? I said, well, I can raise your capital, but I wanted to get access to the drug before he did the study. Because I knew from my research that there was a few other people that were getting the drug. And he said to me, well, if you told me that, I wouldn't have taken the meeting. I said, that's why I'm from Nova Scotia. I don't tell people ahead.
Right, because technically they're not supposed to give the drug out when it's not, until it's tested, right?
Well, they call it, yeah, back.
Yeah.
So, long story, he said, oh, by the way, how is your wife doing? I said, well, why don't you say hello to her? She's just down the street at the hotel. He said, you took her here to Scotland. Well, I said, there's no point me talking to you in Aberdeen, Scotland, and she's over in Toronto. I thought you might like to meet her.
Oh, my goodness.
And he did. And he tested her. And he said, you know, really, she's more advanced than you probably realize. She's, let's say it's out of 6, she's moving into 3 or whatever. But he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. You get approval from the healthcare, and I'll make the drug available to you. Now, when you try to apply to the feds to get approval, they wouldn't do it. So I used to fly back and forth to London to get the medication. Mm-hmm. And I went on his board, Tyrex, out of Singapore. And the medication had a side effect. It would turn your urine purple. But nevertheless, for 4 years, from 2008 to 2012, I had her on the medication. The study wasn't done until Dr. Gosse got involved in that one. And then in 2012, it started to lose the effectiveness because there were still issues around the absorption of the drug. But
did it help her though during those 4 years? Did you did you see a difference?
It helped her enough that she had an internal anxiety because she knew what was happening. This is the other thing that people forget. The patient may forget, but the person doesn't feel. Mm-hmm. They still remember. They have an intrinsic sense of what's going on. We tend to look at people with Alzheimer's, oh, well, they don't know anymore. They don't know my name. I just, let's put them into a home and forget it. I took her to Singapore with me in 2012 to the board meeting. No, she was a little, but she sat through the meeting, and the whole point is she always got more and more. But by that time I had bought the dog. She picked it out. And the dog is, she called the dog after her oldest granddaughter, never changed the name. But life is a journey. And we tend to really, we look at people, oh, well, he doesn't know who I am. I don't care about him. I'm more sorry about myself. It's not the way to think. People
while you were caring for Sharon, though, you ended up having your own health issues, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I had health issues in a sense because I'm a preventative medical guy. I'm always looking for early evidence of disease. One of the things I stumbled upon, because pancreatic cancer is a big issue in people's lives. And, I was said to myself one day, because we scan people in my clinic, is there any precursor that we could detect before the person shows up with a solid mass? And there is a new condition where the duct in the pancreas gets dilated. It's intraductal pap. It's big name, IPMN. Was only discovered about 8 to 10 years ago. And you can measure the duct size. And my uncle had died at 72 with pancreatic cancer. He had lived 4 months from the point of diagnosis to his death. My father's sister died at 78, the same disease. I figured, well, I might have it. So long of it is, I did have it. The most excruciating. I took Sharon with me when I was getting I was getting an MRI. And I'll tell you how dangerous it is when you don't pay attention to your loved one. I'm going in MRI, and she wanted to be there next to me in the room. And as long as she didn't have any metal on, they said, fine. I was so used to her, I never really thought about her ever not being her. So I said, you wait here. And of course, I went into the machine. She didn't know where I went. when I came out, you would think I was a risen God coming out of a grave. But what I learned, the intuitive aspect of brain loss doesn't mean you've lost your empathy or concern or your internal respect. Mm-hmm. And that's where we have to change our attitude.
So how do you think your career as a doctor helped you? Do you think did it play a big role?
Yes and no. I mean, I had the advantage of understanding medicine. I had the advantage of getting access to intuitive medicine. I had my total pancreas removed in 2015 because I figured if you're going to take it out, cancer just doesn't start at one end and doesn't go to the other end. And that was a big operation. But, you know, my wife was still being looked after. I mean, the fact that, you know, you get this was like a whip on steroids, but I've been fine with it. Mm-hmm. Everyone has issues. You can get fine with it. The biggest problem we have in our society is the lack of empathy to the people with the disease. Oh, no, I'm having too much problem. I feel sorry for myself. It's got nothing to do with my medicine. It's got to do with empathy and deep understanding. The person next to you still really knows you. They may not remember your name, but I'll tell you, they do remember.
So when I work with couples, because I work obviously with a family care partner, I mean, some of the biggest challenges that I hear, it's that as the disease progresses, you know, you're losing that communication, that closeness with your spouse. You know, obviously there's a physical intimacy, but there's also just that mental intimacy. What did you find was most challenging for you? Because you had such an incredibly close relationship with Sharon. What was most difficult for you?
I actually observed every now and then, even though her memory was pretty well gone, she would say, "Bob, that's you." Recognition. People recognize people. You may think they didn't, but we have an internal spirit. You know, this idea that I'm the most important person ever to see a guy in the world. God love you. I'm so happy for you. But don't forget, you're still human. Mm-hmm. And the person with the disease, I hope we can modify it. I hope we can change it. And that's part of the research I would like McGill to look at. But more importantly, the biggest thing, and the most important thing that bothers me the most, is a lack of concern at the federal government and healthcare system. Mm-hmm. We've actually got a great program. It's called Medical Assistance in Death. You can apply for it. Mm-hmm. Not only that, they advanced it now. If you've been feeling depressed, don't worry about it. We'll put you down. We have lost empathy, not as an individual, but we have lost empathy of human life. Mm-hmm. And I could look after my dog better than the healthcare will look after you. And it's really, really sad. I have not lost my fur. And when my wife was getting very advanced, I made sure we had her here. Mm-hmm. And every now and then, she knew me. I'll fast forward. When she was actually getting close to dying, well, she was actually, because we were monitoring it. But yet she didn't want to die. Her oxygen had gone to 50%. And she was trying hard to continue to breathe. I always used to call her Mackie. Her last name was Mac. I said, Mackie, it's okay, baby. You can let go. We'll catch up next time around. She actually started to cry. And then she stopped breathing with 2 breaths. Mm-hmm. So life is eternal, whether it's the person you're with today or a person you knew from yesterday, or the person sitting on the sidewalk, because we don't treat psychosis anymore. We've lost, no, I don't think human beings have lost her. I think we as a society have lost her.
I listened to you, and I spent the last 36 hours with my mother at the long-term care residence, and she didn't want to die either. And
no,
and she was crying, and
there you are. She doesn't
and
want
it was she didn't want to go. I mean, she was no longer. She was clearly at the end of life, but it was probably one of the most beautiful moments, but at the same time, it was quite traumatic because what I find in our healthcare system also is, when you go through such a intense intense episode of witnessing. I mean, I was with both my parents when they passed away, and there's
Right.
nobody there offering grief support, grief counseling.
No.
It's like as human beings, we're expected to brush it off our shoulder and get on with life. But, like I just spent the last 10 years caring for my mother and being a care partner. And then all of a sudden she's no longer there. I've witnessed her death and there's nobody there to support me, right? We're supposed to just get on with life.
Just get on with life. You know what? It's a burden taken away from you instead of a
Yeah.
love. And the issue is, I'm not trying to be, some kind of a person. I mean, I can be tough in corners, but I've learned one thing in life. People have a life. They have a mind, and they still have a memory of spirit. And the last part, just to share with you, 2 years after her death, because I have her urn here, she came back as a butterfly. Now people say I'm crazy. I got them. And so I wrote a book because it happened to be my trainer took a picture of the butterfly landing in my finger. Now, no, I'm 49 stories up. So the issue of life is not just how you live it. It's not just how much money you make. Have you really thought about others around you? And the ones that are, unfortunately, have a disease, loss of memory, but they're still a human being. You're not, like, I don't want to see my dog die. He's got a heart failure. But my wife picked him out. He will because he's got a heart murmur. The point is, treat people as human beings. And the people that have a loved one that unfortunately has got themselves in a health situation, they haven't abandoned you. You may abandon them because you say, I'm too tired. And my view is what you've done. You've been a journey with both parents. That's tremendously valuable in the long term for your health. And others that are in the same situation, don't feel sorry for yourself. Grasp a loved one. Hold on to them. They're still there, and she'll be there later. She'll be there later.
Please tell us, I'd love to know about your commitment now and commitment and advocacy in the field of research and education to honor Sharon's memory with the Sharon Francis Institute for Regenerative Medicine. Tell us what you're doing.
So when I started it before she died, because the issue was, I felt we needed to, not to make me feel good, but to remember the person that she was. And we did start, and we funded the first, one of the first brain researches at sick kids to see if we could actually connect two brain cells that were, and they published a paper. And then, but I've always been wondering, it's like this glass of water right here. Okay, see the glass? It's got ice cubes in it. Now, how do the ice cubes get into the glass? Well, we put them in, right? But if brain cell, you get the bad protein in the cell. We now know it's tau, but there's other factors. There's toxic elements. There's all kinds of other stuff. And the lid is not taken off the cell. So I think the research will eventually, Big Pharma has done well getting rid of amyloid, and they'd like to think they're making billions. I want to do a research that has no monetary value to me, but has scientific value to the science of life. And I'm not saying the only person looking at this, but I'm not trying to take what we do and turn it into making me or anyone else $1 billion. So the questions I'm asking, because I have been studying this for a long time, this glass has got the ice cubes in it. This cell is supposed to be firm. You can't put it through the side. But in brain health, the shield gets thin. And when it gets thin, osmosis takes place. In other words, like a sponge to a dry sponge. The question, I think, where science is moving towards is other factors that are inflammatory factors. In fact, they're looking at it from stem cell and aging and membrane thickening and long life. So the question is threefold. And this is the conversation I will have next week with McGill, because I love the research that McGill has done over the years. One, what are the inflammatory factors that may be causing the membrane to become thin? We know they're out there because I'm helping find one of the doctors from McGill who's looking at the inflammatory. Two, now that we understand it, how do we restabilize it? There's some research showing it's like a cut or a cellulitis. We know now if you give you hyperbaric oxygen, it will diminish infection or inflammation. So there's science going around the world saying if I give you, not me, but if we produce and give you access to a hyperbaric oxygenation, we may actually disturb the inflammation and re-strengthen the lining. And there's some studies saying if we can do that, we get a cognitive reversal. So the mission, I'm asking McGill, I'll help raise the money. But more importantly, let's really dig deep. This is not big pharma. It's not that I don't like them, but this is hard-edged research. And I expect there will be an international community that should get engaged. Stop worrying about making the big bucks. Let's do what McGill always did and does. That's why I've asked McGill to reach out.
So, I mean, and you've chosen the best university in the world to help you with that, right?
Absolutely. Don't say I'm prejudiced, okay? But I want a doctor and I want a team that fundamentally is prepared to invest knowledge, time, and research. And you know what? If we can actually figure that out, we'll make the caregivers happy, but it'll also make the person with the problem happy. I respect caregivers, and I know there's grief attached to that. But stop feeling sorry for yourself. People say, oh no, I'm tired of this. I'm the one with the symptoms. Boom, boom, boom. Come on.
Well, I think the key though for that, which is something that I've been advocating and crusading for over the past, more than 10 years now, it's education.
I'm glad we have met.
Right? Is education, because I feel like, so you're a doctor, and imagine diagnosing somebody with heart disease or cancer and saying, oh, well, good luck, go on, right? And why is it, when we talk about, and we just completed writing the World Report with Dr. Gauthier and Morin and Pedro Rosanetto, and the global problem right now with this illness is that patients and their care partners are not provided with information about the illness. Okay, they're not. How is it possible for people to leave an appointment with no information about the illness that they've been diagnosed about? How is that possible, right? Yeah. And so, at McGill, what we're doing is we're trying to change the curriculum. We're talking to the students about post-diagnostic support, the importance. But so when you're meeting your patients, this is my last question now for you, but when you're meeting your patients, what advice would you give? Okay, from the moment that you receive a diagnosis, what do people need to do?
Well, I actually have a brain MRI in my clinic now. So obviously we're looking at it from a differential perspective. I have close friends, unfortunately, that developed the disease. And a lot of the patients or individuals go into denial. Well, I don't have a problem. But the problem is there is a problem, just like heart disease. So if I'm dealing with the patient that's still able to clearly understand, I will say, look, we're working on this, and I'd like you to try X, and we'll get you some hyper. I'm trying, but then I try to tell the partner, and most of the partners are fine. What I'm really, and I'm just putting this out, often the family of the partners say, well, why are we spending money looking after mom or dad? That makes me even more angry because it's not their money. But we've left a society that's lost the internal respect for elderly. And if your mother or father are well-to-do, it's better to apply for MAID for them because the government sponsors it. Well, Dad, he's too old. Most of my patients that have the disease believe it or not, necessarily, they don't want to die.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a whole lack of what I call a warped phenomenon. I'm not trying to be a preacher. I'm a guy that grew up in hard-nosed skeleton growth. But there's two parts. I like to educate the partner, educate the children, and make respect to the one that has the problem. Oh, we're spending too much looking after dad at home, and I get pretty. I'll actually support the child that's looking after them, because often he or she is getting attacked by the siblings saying, well, you're spending too much on dad or mom. So where I'm going with this is two-part full. Mm-hmm. Be empathetic to the person, empathetic to the partner, and be tough with those who disregard that relationship. Understand?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking the time and being with us today. I'm looking forward to meeting with you in person as well. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. This webcast is an initiative of the McGill Dementia Education Program, which is funded by private donations. If you would like to make a contribution to our program, or for more information, please visit us at mcgill.ca/dementia. If you would like to be very well educated, please make sure to download our Dementia Companion Guide, which is now available in 7 different languages, an essential resource. Also, if you'd like to join our mailing list and be notified of upcoming episodes of McGill Cares, as well as other important programs and resources from us, please email us at dementia@mcgill.ca. Thank you for watching.
All the best.